Hello and welcome to Live from Paris with me, Charlie James. These are our headlines. Horrific killings carried out in Ethiopia as government troops fight forces loyal to the Tigray regional government. Amnesty International's East Africa director joins to discuss the group's findings. The U.S. Secretary of State departs for Paris, starting a week-long tour of 7 allied nations. Mike Pompeo to meet with leaders who have congratulated Joe Biden on his election victory. And France remembers the 130 people killed by terrorists in Paris 5 years ago. Mourners held silent ceremonies at the sites targeted by gunmen and suicide bombers. Thanks so much for joining us here on France 24. The United Nations warning that fighting in Ethiopia's Tigray region could spiral out of control and says war crimes may have already been committed. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed ordered military operations in the northern area last week, facing off against forces loyal to Tigray's regional government. Since then, hundreds of people are reported to have been killed, including one massacre confirmed by Amnesty International in which civilians were hacked to death in the streets of one town. For more on this conflict, Dipros Muchenia joins us on the program. He is Amnesty International's director for East and Southern Africa. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. I want to start with this horrific report. Your organization saying hundreds of people were likely stabbed or hacked to death. What else can you tell us about this massacre and how you were able to confirm it?
Well, definitely we have confirmed that a massacre of a very large number of civilians who in fact appeared not to have involved in any of the ongoing military offensive. They were daylight laborers, took place. And we see this as a horrific tragedy whose true extent is only able to be told with time, because at the present moment, communications in Tigray remains shut down. So we are unable to get more information or access the area in the manner in which we would want to do. However, we will continue to use any means available to us to document and report on human rights violations by all sides to the conflict. Our crisis evidence team, lab, was able to examine digitally verified gruesome photographs, as well as videos of bodies strewn on the streets in the town, and also positively identified through geotechnology the area where that massacre actually took place. That's what we have reported, and now we are asking for communication to be restored, because it is important for human rights workers, human rights monitors, as well as humanitarian workers to access the area so that they can continue to do their job.
Right, because the Tigray region for days now has been effectively cut off from any sort of communications. I'm wondering if you can tell us, who is responsible for these killings? Do we know if it was the central government forces or Tigray government forces?
No, we know for a fact that the federal Ethiopian Defense Forces and its military troops are engaged in military combat with Tigray forces and their militia and other troops. So we know that the conflict is between those two parties. We have not been able to confirm those who are actually responsible for the gruesome murder of the people that we were able to count. But speaking to eyewitnesses without confirming whether, in fact, what they were telling is, in fact, what happened, is that some of the eyewitnesses that spoke were pointing their fingers at TPLF fighters. So it's important that this gruesome attack, this massacre, be thoroughly investigated in an efficient manner, in a swift manner, so that the perpetrators who have caused these heinous crimes are brought to book, are brought to justice in fair courts under fair trial rules. That is the only way you can create a deterrent condition for the manner in which this conflict is escalating. Second problem is now we're starting to see movement of people into neighboring Sudan who are fleeing the conflict. The UN has recorded about 11,000 to 15,000 so far. And again, calling on both parties to allow free passage for people to be able to flee the war, while on the other side, Sudan authorities to receive those who are fleeing the war and be able to provide them security.
Dipros Muchenia from Amnesty International, thank you so much for your time. France has confirmed its forces killed a senior al-Qaeda leader in Mali. Bag al-Musa was believed to be responsible for multiple attacks on Malian and international forces, as well as to have helped train recruits. France's defense minister says he was killed 10 days ago in an operation involving ground troops and helicopters. France 24 first reported on the operation Thursday. The French foreign minister says the mission in Mali is bearing fruit, which is important for French security. Have a listen.
We have reorganized in Mali with the help of good intelligence and a good relationship with the joint force, the forces from the 5 countries of the Sahel. We've conducted operations with the Europeans who are bolstering us, in particular at the special forces level, giving us very significant results today. I sometimes hear people ask why this fight is relevant to France, and I answer that it's in the interest of French security against terrorism, because al-Qaeda calls itself an enemy of France, of Europe, and our values.
Warring sides in Libya have agreed to hold national elections in December 2021. The internationally recognized Government of National Accord is holding UN-led talks in Tunisia with Khalifa Haftar's eastern-based Libyan National Army. The UN says the two sides agreed to hold national parliamentary and presidential elections on December 24th of next year. This follows a ceasefire agreed to last month. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on his way to Paris. It's the first stop on his 7-nation tour of U.S. allies. The trip likely to be a bit awkward, since Pompeo will be meeting with world leaders who have congratulated President-elect Joe Biden, despite his boss Donald Trump's refusal to concede. Pompeo set to sit down with the French President Emmanuel Macron on Monday. And Pompeo will also visit Turkey, where Ankara has already criticized his plans to raise the issue of religious freedom. Monty Francis tells us more about the historically tense relationship between Turkey and the Trump administration.
In October of last year, U.S. President Donald Trump wrote a bizarre and threatening letter to Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, warning him not to be a tough guy or a fool, or to appear as a devil to the world. Trump also threatened to destroy the Turkish economy. Erdogan reportedly threw the letter immediately into the trash. Trump's threat to the Turkish leader came after the White House had pulled U.S. troops out of Syria, paving the way for Turkey to launch a military offensive against Kurdish-led forces in northern Syria. The Kurds, an American ally in the fight against the Islamic State group in northern Syria, felt betrayed. They now hope things will change under a Biden administration and could lead to the establishment of a Kurdish state in northern Iraq.
We are optimistic about Biden because he is a close friend of the Kurds. He made a promise, and God willing, he will keep his promise, which is granting us a Kurdish state.
There are other hopes for change under a Biden White House. As vice president, Biden was dispatched to Ankara to repair relations after a failed coup in 2016. Turkey blamed the unsuccessful plot on cleric Fethullah Gulen, who lives in Pennsylvania. The Trump administration refused to extradite him in exchange for the release of a detained American pastor. It's unclear how that could play out with Biden as president, but NATO members have hopes he could bring Turkey more in line with its Western allies, rather than deepening its ties with Russia. After Biden's win, Erdogan issued a statement acknowledging his victory, stressing the strategic nature of bilateral ties with the U.S.
And U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to speak today for the first time since his election loss. The White House says he will update Americans on Operation Warp Speed, the government effort to get a coronavirus vaccine to the public quickly and safely. Trump has yet to concede the election to President-elect Joe Biden, breaking with precedent. We will bring you his remarks live as soon as he begins speaking. A government shakeup tonight in the United Kingdom. A top advisor to Boris Johnson has been spotted leaving the Prime Minister's office carrying a moving box. Dominic Cummings, who is seen as the mastermind behind Brexit, is stepping down from his role. The Prime Minister's office says he will stay on until next month. To help make sense of this, let's bring in our correspondent in London, Benedict Peviot. Benedict, help us understand what the role of Dominic Cummings is. Why is he so important?
Well, this is significant news, and you're right. Dominic Cummings was important. Normally, advisors advise and politicians decide. And indeed, it is because it was felt that this Prime Minister's senior advisor, Dominic Cummings, was too powerful, sidelined Conservative MPs, was sometimes and often confrontational, aggressive, that he has gone. He and the Director of Communications, Lee Kane. This has all happened within the last 24 hours. Dominic Cummings walking out of a door that is not next to his office, but making sure that the world's press saw him. And so we see him with that box of his belongings. Why is he so important? Because, as you said in your introduction, he helped Boris Johnson and others to plan the campaign, the Vote Leave campaign, the Brexit referendum, a campaign in 2016 that was successful, contrary to what opinion polls had predicted. He helped Boris Johnson plan his comeback when Boris Johnson quit the post of Foreign Secretary, unhappy with then Prime Minister Theresa May, who was leading the country. He helped plan and strategize the suddenly early general election called in December of last year, and helped the government and the Conservative Party get an 80-seat majority, a resounding victory. But he became very well known to the British public, angered the British public, because in the midst of a pandemic, of a national United Kingdom across the country lockdown, he flouted the rules, drove hundreds of miles when millions of other people and ordinary British citizens did not. So he became extremely prominent, and MPs, backbenchers particularly, and some ministers have actually welcomed tonight this suddenly announced, since we thought he was staying till the end of the year, departure of Dominic Cummings, often also labelled as a Svengali of Boris Johnson, making the decisions the Prime Minister didn't want to make.
So if his Svengali is gone, what, Benedict, does this signal about the stability of Boris Johnson's inner circle?
Well, the important thing is what is being said very much by Conservative MPs, of whom, of course, their leader is Boris Johnson, is that relationship between Parliament, between lawmakers and their boss, Boris Johnson, has been damaged by this particular advisor's influence. They think the tone is going to change. They think it's an opportunity for a reset, a fresh start. And they hope that more than the tone, but the relationship will improve. What is not clear yet, as we have the Brexit deal or no deal looming, as we've had a few times, but now we're really up against it, since the end of the transition period is on the 31st of December. What is not clear is whether the policy will change. That is a big question mark tonight.
France 24's Benedict Peviot, always keeping us updated on the ins and outs of British politics. Thank you so much. Thousands of people have been seen leaving the Nagorno-Karabakh region, heading for Armenia's capital. The recent ceasefire deal brokered by Russia has been widely viewed as favoring Azerbaijan. And under the terms, several ethnic Armenian-dominated areas will be handed over to Azerbaijan on Sunday. And Armenians in the region worry they will face retaliatory attacks. Russia is deploying almost 2,000 troops, as well as tanks, to secure the truce, which ended 6 weeks of fighting. Today marks 5 years since the worst peacetime attack in France's history. November 13th, 2015, terrorists carried out a series of coordinated bombings and shootings across Paris, killing 130 people. This year, due to the current pandemic, the victims were formally remembered in a small, solemn tribute at 7 sites targeted. The Prime Minister and the Mayor of Paris led the silent ceremonies.
Five years on from France's deadliest peacetime attack, and the wounds of November 13th, 2015 are still raw. On Friday, Prime Minister Jean Castex and Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo attended memorial ceremonies at the multiple sites targeted by that day's coordinated attacks. The Stade de France in the Paris suburb of Saint-Denis, 5 cafes in eastern Paris, and the Bataclan concert hall. The jihadist suicide bombers and gunmen killed 130 people and injured hundreds. The attacks led to intensified French military action against extremists abroad and a security crackdown at home. Friday's proceedings were scaled down this year due to the coronavirus pandemic, with the public unable to attend. Survivors of the attacks and the relatives of those killed and injured requested that the ceremonies be carried out in relative silence to place emphasis on remembrance. The commemorations came as France is again under high alert for terrorist attacks, following 3 Islamic extremist attacks in September that left 4 people dead.